How's it going, everybody? So I'm a little peeved. I'd started this video 10 or 15 minutes ago. It's supposed to be beautiful today, sun shining, everything, and you know, I guess it's like most places, the weather people have no clue. They don't know what's going on because it's scattered showers, 50% chance of rain, wind started blowing out of nowhere, started raining, run me off. I had a good backdrop. I don't have many McCulloch saws, I don't have as much yellow as I have green, so I didn't have much of a backdrop to begin with, to be honest with you. Just my, I have a Super Pro 81 project down here, and then my Pro Max 700 I got from my father that I put a lot of time and money into rebuilding it. That's the one that went to the chainsaw guy, Saw King, whatever you know him by, up in Oregon. He fixed it up, and shortly after it nuked. I think it sucked some rust up. The muffler was all rusty, so I couldn't find anything else that could have scored the piston, so I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But I had those two, back up behind me. It was nice. Needless to say, I got ran out, so now I'm under the back patio, and I committed to doing this video today, so I'm gonna do the video. All right. McCulloch. As you can tell by the headline, there's quite a bit of history here. As always, I have extensive notes and another little thing that I'll show you here later that I made to kind of help me keep track of the models and kind of their whole timeline. So you see me glance in some particular direction, I'm referencing notes. So Mr. Robert Paxton McCulloch was a championship hydroplane racer. I'm not exactly sure when he raced, but in the 30s is when he really started getting into the small engines, the engines and stuff. He married a Barbara Ann Briggs from, you guessed it, Mr. Stephen Foster Briggs of Briggs and Stratton. That was his daughter. So he kind of married into the whole small engine game there. And in the 1930s, he manufactured engines for midget racers. And he was really good at it because he done really well. And in 1943, he sold his business to Borg Warner and then started McCulloch Aviation Incorporated just a few months later. At McCulloch Aviation, he hooked up with a company called Radioplane out of Los Angeles, California, where he supplied generators and manufactured engines for target drones to train U.S. pilots for World War II. So he had a big part in training our Air Force to go fight over in the Pacific and in, I think, I can't remember if we sent airplanes over to Europe or not, but I digress. So due to his success in 1943 through 1946, he come to the realization that small, lightweight engines were kind of the future. So that's what he began focusing on, is lightweight engines, and moved his business from Wisconsin to Los Angeles, California. Built a 80,000 square foot facility out there and moved all of his production there. So when the war ended in 1945, he was contracted by Reed Prentice to produce a chainsaw engine for them. And during this agreement, this contract, which lasted about a year or so, I think it lasted about a year, something like that. Lasted about a year, no more than 3 years, but I'm pretty sure it lasted about a year. He came up with his own design for chainsaws. So, born from the Reed Prentice contract, he set out designing the 1220 something, 1220A, something like that. Anyway, that particular two-man chainsaw morphed into the 549, which was released in 1949. And it was 5 horsepower, 49 pounds, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. And it came in at $400. So it actually managed to capture nearly 2/3 of the market in 2 years. And following the 549, he released the revolutionary 325, 3 horsepower, 25 pound, with a all-position diaphragm carburetor that he helped develop. So after the Reed Prentice contract ended in 1946, Mr. McCulloch changed the name from McCulloch Aviation Incorporated to McCulloch Motors. So he was transitioning more towards motors and small lightweight engines. So he felt, I guess, that the name should reflect such. So with the release of the 549 and the 325 in 1949, 1950, he already became almost an instant success. I mean, 2 years you capture 2/3 of the chainsaw market. That's pretty dang good. So coming out of the 40s, he also manufactured chainsaw chain, and this was a big period coming out of the 40s into the 50s. There was a lot of chain redesign and invention going on, trying to come up with a better cutting chain. So in the late 40s, McCulloch, along with 2 or 3 others, were manufacturing a half circle tooth that was easily sharpened with a file, and pretty sure that's kind of a reference to like a chipper chain, old school chipper chain. So in moving into the 50s, 1955, so the patent war, coming out of the 40s into the 50s, the patent war was in full swing. And what that references is all the companies that were designing chains at the time were racing to get patents on certain technologies to try and get market share in the chain industry. And McCulloch was a big proponent of that. Them in Oregon are, according to my research, all the sources that I looked through, McCulloch and Oregon were 2 of the biggest patent seekers or patent filers in chain design at the time. So moving right along, and also in 1955, they had success, lots of success through the 40s. With the 549, the 325. There's also a few other models through the 40s you can see here. So your 430, 447, another 2-man saw, 755, the 33, Super 33. Not the 40s, into the 50s. So that's the 50s, the beginning of the 50s. So the 325, 549, 430, 47, 755, 33, Super 33, 73, which was a 120cc gear reduction monster for large timber. Probably one of the strongest gear drive saws ever produced. Had a gear reduction ratio of like 3.69 to 1. So at 120 cc's, you're talking about some power right there. There wasn't a whole lot made that could compete with it. But that was the big timber killers. 73, 77. So that was 1955. 1956 they released the D44, which was revolutionary because it incorporated the new innovative reed valves with a third port transfer induction. So that's where the kind of the cart technology was born, and it made a lot hotter engine. And this was basically McCulloch's ascent into the top of the chainsaw industry happened in the late 40s, early 50s, and they climbed to the top relatively quickly, and they stayed there pretty much through the 50s, through the 60s, and it wasn't until the 70s that they started their decline. And you'll see all that here. So they released the D44, which was revolutionary. They used this design pretty much almost completely in every saw moving forward. In 1958, so that was 1956 that the D44 was released. So in 1958, they changed the name to McCulloch Corp because at this particular point in time, McCulloch was branching out. He was really wanting to get into the outboard market, which was already, taken up with. You had OMC, you had Evinrude, you probably had another couple companies in there. I know that McCulloch bought out an outboard company to try and edge into that market. He was also into oil exploration and geothermal researching, geothermal energy, stuff like that. He was an entrepreneur, man. He was real big into cutting edge, trying to find that next thing. So he had a bunch of companies, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why he changed the name to McCulloch Corp, as kind of an umbrella. He built superchargers as well. He made lots of money building superchargers and turbochargers, like for Detroit engines, and he built some superchargers for some luxury cars and all that kind of stuff. So in 1959, basically the first kart engine was born, the MC-10, which was adapted from the chainsaw engines that they developed back in the mid-50s with the triple port design, intake reeds, that kind of stuff, all that stuff. So moving along, we get to the 60s. 1961, McCulloch introduces the 1- series, is what I call it. So like the 152, 62, 42, 92, 72, 82, those saws. Those saws were a real big hit. In 1962, McCulloch becomes the first chainsaw company to pass the 1 million saw sold mark. So they got to 1 million before anybody else in the industry. And you had Poland, you had Homelight, you had IEL, you had, at that time, I think it may have been OMC in the 60s, yeah, because they bought IEL back in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. So you had OMC or Pioneer. So Pioneer was a player. Power Machinery, started by the IEL engineers that didn't go to Pioneer with OMC. You had all the other companies like Remington Mall, all those. So McCulloch beat all of them to 1,000,000 saws. 1963 is when Mr. Robert established Lake Havasu City. So Lake Havasu City basically was born out of McCulloch's drive to break into the outboard market. So he needed a place to test his outboards for research and development. So through his petroleum exploration and geothermal companies, he ended up with about 13,300 acres that he bought out in Arizona. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Arizona. So he ended up with that late 50s into the 60s, and he decided that he was going to start a city. And in 1963 he established Lake Havasu City, and in 1964 he started building a chainsaw manufacturing plant there, and it was opened in 1965, and he done that to bring people there to grow the city. And that was one of several cities that him and his companies helped establish. Probably the most well known. Says the land was acquired through his oil company, his oil exploration company. Now in 1964 they released the models 790, the 890, 740, 450, 640. So those several of those were big cube direct drive. There's some gear drives in there, so you're still cutting big wood at that time in the 60s. 1965, McCulloch developed the ultra lightweight 10 series. This was McCulloch's answer to a year previous the XL12 Homelight beat him to it. 12 pound 54 cc's, 12 pounds. They beat them to the lightweight chainsaws. Chances are they were being developed at the same time. Homelight just beat them out. They launched theirs first, the XL12. I mean, it speaks volumes, you know about it. The 10 series does too, but the 10 series came in at pretty much the same horsepower. Well, I say the same horsepower. The engines were completely different, and your 10 series definitely outperformed the XL12s. But the 10 series was lighter, so even though Homelight got to the market first, I don't think that, don't get me wrong, the XL12s and Super XLs, they're built like tanks. They're reliable, they are. But the 10 series were a hotter saw. They were. I mean, that was McCulloch's nature. I mean, they built some hot saws. So the 10 series were released in 65. 1966, and these next couple years are just going to be just models. I mean, model milestones. You got 1966, you got the 795, the 895, the 550, the 410s, 310E, excuse me, first electric start battery start chainsaw, so the Pro 510. 1967, you got the 210G, the 510G, the 510E, and those were two the lightest weight gear drives in production at the time. The 510E, the 660, and the 797. 797 came in 1967. So in 1968, you have the 1010 Auto, the 510 Auto, and then the 6.5 pound Power Max 6 came on the scene. So that was the lightest weight chainsaw in the world at the time. And also in 1968, you have Robert McCulloch he purchased the London Bridge. So the London Bridge was sinking. So the city of London sold it, and they sold it to Robert McCulloch for over $1 million, and it had to be moved brick by brick. So the cost of purchasing the bridge and everything cost Mr. McCulloch $2.4 million, and he moved that bridge to Lake Havasu City, and you could go see it to this day. It's still there, and it was moved brick by brick. So basically what they did is they took a brick off, serialized the brick, put it on a truck, shipped it, and then as they were putting it back together, they used the serialized numbers to reassemble the bridge brick by brick. So, and that basically, 1969 is when your CP-125 come out, and 71 was when your SP-125 and your SP-80s come out. So getting into the Super Pro models, and then the Super Pro models were early 70s, and that was probably the cutoff. Like after that, that was McCulloch at its peak. So after that, you start to go downhill, and it becomes apparent. So 1973, due to waning national interest in do-it-yourself wood stove heating, McCulloch was purchased by Black & Decker for $65 million in 1973. So when you account for inflation, that's about $367 million in 2018. And Black & Decker is really where it started to, because Black & Decker was a publicly traded company at the time. You know, I don't think Mr. Robert ever took, as a matter of fact, I'm almost positive he never took the company public. But Black & Decker, I'm pretty sure, was a public company at the time, and if it wasn't a public company at the time, it became later. But Black & Decker did not have McCulloch's best interest in mind. So you got to think Black & Decker was also in several other different industries, and they basically purchased a company that had market share in another industry that they're like, it would be good to have because they're making lots of money, but not something that they were really passionate about. And because of that, you saw McCulloch starting to go down. And this is a long video, guys. I'm sorry. We're at 23 minutes already, and I got probably at least 10 more to go. So after the Black & Decker buyout, so they continue to manufacture a lot of your Super Pro saws all the way up until 1977, when all your Pro Max stuff started coming out. The Pro Max stuff was basically a revision of the McCulloch lineup, and you saw saws like the SP-125 drop out. Your Pro Mac 1010s came on the scene. Your Pro Mac, your Pro Mac 700s, your 850s came on the scene, and a lot of your smaller stuff. But if you at this particular point in time, coming out of the 60s into the 70s, a lot of your old growth stuff had been cut. You were starting to move into second growth stuff. Your saws weren't as big. You didn't need giant saws like the SP-125s or the big gear drives and stuff anymore, because you weren't cutting trees that were 10, 12, 13, 14 feet on the stump anymore. So that era was gone. Now, upon this revision, I'm not going to say it was the worst thing, because you have stuff that come out of that, like the Pro Mac 850, which was awesome. The Pro Mac 1010, I mean, it's kind of awesome as well. The Pro Mac 700, awesome. All those saws, great. So this this wasn't quite what killed it. What killed it, for me, in my opinion, based on the research that I have done, so they continued relatively at this particular point in time. So coming in late 60s, early 70s, a lot of your foreign companies were starting to be brought into the U.S. There were distributors, Steel, Husqvarna, Solo, John's Red in 1968, 1969. All those companies, Dolmar, they were all starting to come over here. So a lot of these European saws had already, they didn't have big trees like that over there. They were already designing lightweight, direct drive saws with good anti-vibration that could cut toe-to-toe with any American saw, or even better in the smaller wood. So that's when the good American muscle saws really started hurting, is during that time. When the big trees were gone, that's when our industry really started hurting. So in 1984 is when things really started their decline. Donald V. Marchese, I guess that's how you say his name, he was the president of the McCulloch Motors division, McCulloch Corporation division of Black & Decker. Him and several upper management folks and some investors decided to purchase McCulloch Co. from Black & Decker. So I actually, in my research, I found all their names and everything, but the only one that I chose to include was Donald V. Marchese, who was the president at the time. I didn't feel it important to name the private investors. So you had several upper management people, the president, Donald V. Marchese. You had 3 members from a Meridian Ventures company out of Boston, which was a healthcare company. You had 2 officers in a freight forwarding and importing company that was out of Boston. You had a director from the United Tech Corporation, and you had a private investor from Fort Wayne, Indiana. They all went in together and they purchased McCulloch from Black & Decker. And that was in 1984. And as you can see, that's when your Double Eagles and all those saws started popping up. So they weren't really doing much R&D as much as they were regurgitating saw models that were really popular back in the day. In my research, I found a snippet where someone was talking, and they said that ultimately this was around the same time that they started a European division and started manufacturing saws in Italy. And the gentleman said that a lot of the R&D went over there and not here, because ultimately the investors failed and couldn't sustain it. So somewhere around the 1990s, they sold out to Shopvac Corp, and Shopvac Corp didn't have any, honestly, they were completely disconnected from what McCulloch was about, and they just run McCulloch into the ground is what they did. They really did. And in 1999, they declared bankruptcy. The McCulloch Corporation, or the Shopvac Corporation, one of the two, declared Chapter 11. So the European division was sold off to Husqvarna AB, and a company called Jinfeng is who purchased the North American division, or the rights to produce or manufacture in North America. After this sellout of McCulloch's assets, In March 2003, MTD signs with Jinfeng to produce products in North America, or to provide products and distribute products, McCulloch products in North America. And I'm pretty sure that's where all the generators and the vacuums and all that stuff, all the random McCulloch stuff that you see came from. And in March of 2008, as always, Husqvarna AB acquired the outdoor products division from Jinfeng. So yet another American legacy purchased and is now in control, or purchased and is now controlled by Husqvarna AB. I'm not going to say Husqvarna ruined them, because they didn't. I'm pretty sure Black & Decker and Shopvac did that. Not Black & Decker. The tail end of Black & Decker and the private investors is what ruined them. They did not, their focus was not where it needed to be. If Robert had maintained possession of the company, it probably would have been a completely different thing. But this is, this is unfortunately the history. That's what happened. So now all these little box store McCullochs you see, they look like Polands because, basically they are. So let's see. Husqvarna AB has, let's see, Pioneer, Poland, McCulloch, Partner, John's Red. That's 5 right there that they killed. The only one that I know they don't own is Homelight, because Tektronix owns Homelight. I love doing this. I love learning the history. Though the history of a lot of these American saw manufacturers don't end well. Progress. The progress in the industry, in the lightweight, the fast, is what hurt them. And mismanagement in the corporation side of Black & Decker and McCulloch, having to please shareholders and all that kind of stuff is what led to their demise. So I know you saw me pick this up a couple times. I just kind of wanted to show you this. I made this. It's a timeline that shows the buyouts on the bottom. So it goes from 1943 all the way to present. And it shows you the changing of hands there, all the way across. And then most of the most popular models from 1949 all the way to present, to when they really stopped manufacturing chainsaws, or good quality chainsaws. I got some cart saws up there, or some cart engines up there, and it just kind of shows the overlap, what all occurred at the same time, and basically I've done this to show, here is McCulloch's heyday right here, which is basically the 1980. That was their reign, from the 50s to the 80s, right there. Hope you enjoyed. I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to do next. I've been paying attention to comments. A couple people have offered some suggestions, so that's what I'm going to go with. But I hope you enjoyed it. It's kind of long, but there's a lot more history here than in any of the others that I did. So if you enjoy them, I mean, I'm going to keep doing them. So a lot of you enjoyed the Poland video, so I hope you enjoy this one. Hope everyone has a good Easter, and we'll see you next time.